Atlanta radio has a royal family, and for 2 decades, one name has been near the top of it, Big Tigger. To millions of listeners across the South, he's simply the voice that gets them to work every morning. But in the summer of 2026, that voice went silent, not because of a rating slide or a contract dispute, but because of a criminal case unfolding inside his own home, and a second legal fight that would pull in his own co-host. This is the full timeline of how it happened, told through what's actually on the record, police affidavits, court filings, and statements from the people involved. Before he was a household name in Atlanta, Darian Morgan was a DJ working the Baltimore radio circuit at WERQ 92Q. In 1996, he started doing voiceover work for BET, and within a year, he was on camera as part of Rap City's hip-hop news segment. By 1998, he was co-hosting Rap City itself alongside Big Les and Joe Claire, and not long after, he became a face of BET's flagship show, 106 and Park. For an entire generation of hip-hop fans, Big Tigger wasn't just a radio voice. He was the guy who introduced them to music videos, celebrity interviews, and the culture itself, night after night on national television, from 1998 all the way through 2005. Tigger's radio career followed him south. He built shows like Live in the Den on WPGC in the DC market, and in January of 2013, he took over the afternoon drive slot on WVE V103 in Atlanta. Over the years that followed, he moved into the station's morning show, arguably the single most valuable time slot in Atlanta radio. He also built a public-facing philanthropic side to his career, founding the Big Tigger Foundation to support youth programs in the city. By 2026, he wasn't just an employee of V103. He was in many ways the institution's public face, a fixture the station had built more than a decade of its brand around. In May of 2026, V103 brought on a new co-host for the morning show, Francesca Amiker. She was not a radio newcomer looking for a break. She was a four-time Emmy-winning television journalist with 16 years in the industry. A Vanderbilt University graduate and the youngest inductee into that school's Media Hall of Fame, she anchored at 11 Alive News in Atlanta, where within her first month, she landed interviews with Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey. She later became a correspondent for E! News before returning home to Georgia Radio, joining the show that would become known as the Big Tigger Morning Show. Whatever else would be said about her in the months that followed, Amiker arrived at V103 with a reputation built on her own accomplishments, not anyone else's. According to police records, everything changed on the night of May 9th, 2026, inside a home in Sandy Springs, a suburb just north of Atlanta. What exactly happened is still contested. But according to an arrest affidavit later filed by Sandy Springs police, Morgan's wife, Alicia Brown, told investigators that a verbal argument turned physical and that she was shoved into an office door hard enough to leave a deep laceration above her eye. The couple's minor children were reportedly in the home at the time, a detail that would later shape the specific charges filed against Morgan. Brown was taken to the hospital, where the cut above her eye required stitches to close. Under Georgia law, an injury of that severity can elevate a domestic incident from a misdemeanor into felony territory, specifically aggravated battery, which involves serious bodily disfigurement, loss, or impairment. That single legal distinction, misdemeanor battery versus felony aggravated battery, would end up mattering enormously for how seriously the case was treated by prosecutors in the weeks ahead. Here's something that often gets lost in the retelling. Morgan wasn't arrested that night, or even that week. Sandy Springs police spent more than a month building their case, interviewing witnesses, reviewing medical records, and, as will later become clear, examining video evidence before an arrest warrant was finally issued. That gap, over 40 days, tells you this wasn't a snap decision by police. It was a deliberate investigation into a public figure, and departments tend to move carefully in cases like that, precisely because they know the scrutiny that follows an arrest of someone with this much public visibility. On June 20th, Sandy Springs police arrested Darian Morgan. He was charged with aggravated battery, simple battery, and third-degree cruelty to children, the last charge tied directly to the couple's minor children, who police say were present in the home during the altercation. Morgan posted bond shortly after his arrest. Through his attorney, he denied the allegations, stating he had, quote, complete confidence in the facts and in the legal process. It was a carefully worded statement, one that didn't dispute an incident occurred, but firmly disputed the characterization of it. Days after the arrest, a judge granted Alicia Brown a temporary protective order. She was awarded exclusive use of the family home and temporary custody of the children. On paper, this is a routine step in domestic cases, a legal mechanism to separate two people while a criminal matter plays out, and it does not by itself constitute a finding of guilt. In practice, though, it meant the marriage and the public image built around it for years was now unraveling in a courthouse file open for anyone to read. Then, in late June and again in early July, video began circulating publicly. A home security camera and, separately, cell phone footage appeared to show Morgan and Brown in a physical struggle over a phone during the encounter that led to his arrest. TMZ was first to publish the clips. Crucially, the footage didn't settle anything. It intensified the fight over what actually happened that night, with supporters on both sides pointing to the exact same video as proof of completely different stories. Neither clip includes audio clear enough to make out what was said in the moment, which left viewers filling in the emotional context themselves. Once the footage went public, so did the public's opinions, loudly and immediately. Comment sections split into camps before most people had even read the actual charges. Some pointed to the video as clear evidence of aggression. Others argued the same clip showed a mutual struggle, not a one-sided assault. This is worth sitting with for a second. A 30-second video clip, stripped of context, audio, and everything that happened before and after it, became the entire trial in the court of public opinion, weeks before either side had presented a single piece of evidence in an actual courtroom. As the case became public and the pressure mounted, Morgan stepped away from V103's morning show, described by the station as a voluntary leave taken to focus on his family and his legal defense. For a host who had built 2 decades of his identity around being on the air every single weekday morning, the silence itself became a headline. Inside Radio and other trade outlets covered the leave as a significant shift for the station, which had to figure out how to run its flagship morning slot without the person it had been built around. Then the story split in a direction almost nobody saw coming. Francesca Amiker, Morgan's own co-host, filed a federal defamation lawsuit, not against Morgan, against his estranged wife. According to the complaint, Amiker alleges that Alicia Brown used multiple social media accounts to spread false claims that Amiker was having an affair with Morgan, and that those claims caused real measurable damage to her career and reputation, built over 16 years in television news. The suit reportedly seeks damages in federal court, a venue choice that itself signals how seriously Amiker's legal team is treating the reputational harm. It's worth pausing here because defamation lawsuits are often misunderstood. To win, Amiker doesn't just need to show that something false was said about her. Under U.S. law, she has to prove a false statement of fact was published to a third party, that it damaged her reputation, and because she's arguably a public figure given her television career, that Brown made the statements with actual malice, knowing they were false, or with reckless disregard for the truth. That is a high legal bar established by the Supreme Court decades ago, specifically to protect speech about public figures. Filing the lawsuit is step 1. Meeting that standard in front of a federal judge is an entirely different, much harder step 2. Alicia Brown, through her own attorneys, has pushed back hard on the defamation claim, denying wrongdoing and framing the lawsuit as part of a broader effort to discredit her account of the original domestic incident. In her telling, the suit is retaliation dressed up as litigation, time to undercut her credibility right as the criminal case against her husband moves forward. In Amiker's telling, is simple accountability for false claims that hurt a career she spent 16 years building. A federal judge, not social media, will ultimately decide whose framing holds up, and that process by design moves slowly. Just when the story seemed to be a 2-sided legal fight, it grew a third front. In early July, Alicia Brown was arrested on a separate warrant, reportedly connected to kidnapping allegations. Details remain limited at this stage, and it's not yet clear how or if this new case connects to the original domestic incident or the defamation suit. But the arrest instantly complicated the public narrative that had been building for weeks, one where Brown had largely been cast as the alleged victim in the original case against her husband. It's also worth looking at how this played out across outlets because the coverage itself became part of the story. TMZ drove the news cycle with the leaked video content, publishing clips as they obtained them. Local Atlanta outlets, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Fox 5, WSB-TV, CBS Atlanta, focused more on the court filings themselves, the actual language of the arrest affidavit, the specific charges, the federal complaint's exact wording. Reading only the viral clips gives you a very different story than reading the underlying legal documents. Both are true, they're just not the same story. Take a step back and look at where things actually stand. There are, right now, 3 separate legal proceedings running in parallel, all connected to the same small circle of people. Darian Morgan faces felony criminal charges from the May incident, aggravated battery, and cruelty to children. Alicia Brown faces a federal defamation lawsuit from Francesca Amiker over the affair allegations. And Brown now separately faces her own new criminal exposure from the kidnapping warrant. 3 courts, 3 sets of lawyers, 3 timelines, and every one of them still wide open as of this recording. As of now, nothing here has been resolved. Morgan's criminal case is pending. He has not been convicted of anything, and the presumption of innocence applies to him exactly as it would to anyone else facing charges. Amiker's federal lawsuit against Brown is still in its early stages, months if not longer from any resolution, and Brown herself now carries her own separate criminal case, entirely apart from her role as the alleged victim in the original incident. Court dates for all 3 matters are still developing, and any of them could shift the entire narrative once evidence is actually presented under oath. Realistically, here's a timeline to watch. Morgan's criminal case will proceed through preliminary hearings before any trial date is set. Georgia felony cases like this often take the better part of a year to reach trial, if they reach trial at all, since many resolve through negotiated pleas well before that point. Amiker's federal defamation suit will likely spend months in discovery, where both sides exchange evidence before any hearing on the merits. And Brown's kidnapping case will run on its own separate clock in its own courtroom with its own prosecutors. None of these are fast processes, no matter how quickly the public conversation has moved. Strip away the boldface names, and this is a story that plays out in courtrooms every single day, a domestic dispute, competing accounts of what happened, and a public that had already decided the verdict before a single trial even began. The difference here is a hot mic, a national platform built over 30 years of a career, and a co-host with their own hard-earned reputation caught in the crossfire. What actually happened inside that Sandy Springs home in May is still, legally speaking, an open question. Everything else, the video clips, the comment sections, the takes, is noise until the court says otherwise.